The Force in R-Type. Welcome to ChinnyVision episode 500. Yes, that's a sentence I never thought I'd be saying. And today we are looking at R-Type, a 1987 arcade game from Irem. Do I need to tell you about R-Type? No, I don't. So I'm not going to. Let's just get on with it. There's my copy sitting on the shelf. I got this on budget from Hit Squad for my Amstrad CPC, and that's where we will begin. And yeah, it's episode 500, so we're going to have quite a bit of CRT capture today. Now, the Amstrad version is a port of Bob Pape's Spectrum version done by Keith Goodyear. Had 21 days to do it. So if you're thinking specky port, then yes, it is a specky port. And it's a multi-load game. Nothing like music or anything like that. And off we go. Just spot effects. And yes, it is recognisably R-Type. It is quite slow. As you'll know with R-Type, you can either rapidly fire with your spacecraft or you can hold down fire to build up the beam, which will give you a more powerful blast. And here's the direct capture. So the alien patterns match the arcade. The game does all the way through, and when Bob Pape coded it, he actually had a VHS recording of the game with invulnerability on so he could see all the alien patterns. Amusingly, he went to the arcade and couldn't get off level 1. Because CPC owners will complain, I don't usually cover remakes in these videos, but here's the more recently released CPC remake, which makes better use of the hardware, although still slightly jerky in its movement. Quite good fun though. Over to the Spectrum, and we will start with the 48K. This is the Bob Pape original that the Amstrad version was converted from. He designed the graphics to avoid colour clash. Incidentally, there's a book that Bob's put out. It's 138 pages long and free to download. It's called It's Behind You, and it gives you inordinate details about how he coded the Spectrum version of the game. Here's the C64, in fact the second version coded for the C64, done by Manfred Trenz and Andreas Escher. In fact, Activision had a coding team in the UK working on a version, but then they gave Manfred Trenz 6 weeks to start again because he'd coded Catechis, which was basically an R-Type rip-off, and they took exception to it and said, look, we won't take any legal action if you come here and program our version of R-Type. Don't know if that original version of R-Type is still out there. Menu refers to 2 players, but it is in fact turn-based. So here's the first version that has the proper R-Type music when you start the game, that we've seen anyway. Now this was done in 6 weeks, and the crack here I've got has some fixes in it, because apparently there's a few bugs with the original. As I recall, Zach weren't too enamoured with this. I think they gave it a mark in the 70s, saying it was just a little bit too bland compared to Catechis. Oh, the irony, given that it's probably using some of that code. I do have invulnerability on, by the way, although the Force, which is the thing you can see at the front of the craft there, does absorb enemy bullets, and you can detach it and attach it, but we'll show that in a bit. Game Boy version. A little bit of a change for ChinnyVision. Only going to be showing the first couple of levels for this. Converted in the UK, apparently. This is R-Type DX, which is 3 versions of R-Type on 1 cartridge, or 3 versions if you've got a Game Boy Colour. R-Type 1, R-Type 2 and R-Type DX, which is basically R-Type but with enhanced graphics. So here we go. So again, looking and sounding familiar. Ace gave the Game Boy version 820 out of 1,000 using their strange scoring system. And should you want to see what this looks like on an original Game Boy screen, well, I've done my best here. I assure you the screen is in focus, it's just a Game Boy screen. Also, I've now got a vertical line running down my screen. Help! I think that means one of the solder connections has come loose or something on that ribbon cable. There's the Force coming in there. And the blurriness made it look like a bullet hit me there, but I assure you no cheat was on. I think it's just the blurriness of the Game Boy screen. Always thought those things are coming towards you there as swans. Game Boy Colour version. These two versions are very difficult to record. I'm crouched over the camera and a tripod trying to work around it. So again, apologies for the wonky screen. But this version of R-Type is the original, except it has enhanced graphics for better visibility on the Game Boy Colour screen. And it has auto-fire by default. And it will save your game position as well, thanks to a battery in the cartridge, which I didn't know was there, so I'm going to have to sort that one out. But look how lovely this looks, like even on the slightly compressed down screen, even if it is impossible to play with me trying to get round the tripod. MSX version, and we'll only be seeing level 1 of this because I couldn't get the cartridge to work on my SD card adapter. I did get a disk image version to work, but only level 1 would load. And it's MSX2, by the way. I'm unsure if the R-Type 2 cartridge on the MSX is supposed to have any enhancements in it, because the music sounds rather lacking, like it needs something else. So either it is plinky plonk like this, or there's a second chip in that cartridge that I don't have that gives you better audio. There's the swans. And the force can be in front of you or behind you. You just release it and then fly around it, so it goes into a different position. Very useful for putting behind you when you've got enemies following you. As you can see on the MSX, the only thing using the sprites are the enemy bullets and your craft and the force. The enemies themselves appear to be standard graphics moving in 8x8 pixel chunks or something like that. Sega Master Systems, where Mean Machines gave it 92% and Ace gave it 808. Regarded for, well, at the time and many years, and perhaps even today, as one of the finest games on the Master System. And yes, I am running this in PAL because I live in PAL land, so the music does sound slightly slowed down, the gameplay sounds slowed down, and so on. And here it is on a CRT, looking rather lovely. Although it is, flickery when there's a lot of graphics going on the screen. But imagine this just as a still, how good it looks. You shoot those little things there, and they release things that gives you power-ups. That may be different weapons. When the force in front of you or behind you is released, you only have... died there. You only have a certain amount of firepower. You only get the enhanced firepower with the special weapons when you're joined up with the force and it's attached to you. Atari ST. ST Amiga format gave this 96%. Activision doing all the UK home ports. Good stories about their Southampton offices in Bob Pape's book. So it's a little bit jerky on the ST. Beefy AY rendition of the theme. And because of the different screen resolutions, it looks rather... all the graphics look bigger. Which does change the gameplay. Over to the Amiga. So Factor 5 have done the Amiga version for Rainbow Arts. And this is looking smoother than the ST. So initially you think there's no sound effects, but once it gets the intro out the way... There you go, that's a bit better. Forwarded it on later into level 1, and we should have the iconic end of level 1 baddie coming up, which you saw in the screenshots and all the magazine reviews and went, wow. So approaching the end of level baddie on the Game Boy Colour. Again, it looks like that bullet hit me, but there is no cheat activated. There is on some of these other versions, especially when I get further into the game. Power up there. Oh, now we've got lasers that shoot diagonally. Watch him. He takes a couple of massive blasts. Oh, see, definitely no cheat on. He takes a couple of big blasts to kill. MSX version. I find it difficult to tell which power-up you've picked up. There is colour coding, I think, but in the heat of battle it's hard to spot. So, of course, on the MSX, you're competing against Gradius / Nemesis, and reading some of the reviews from MSX users, yeah, they don't really seem to like R-Type that much. There's an elephant in the room for all these versions I'm covering today, because there's one system I don't own that has arguably the best home version of R-Type, and that's the PC Engine. I'll show it here under emulation. It's very authentic, and yes, the screen scrolls up and down slightly in order to get the full playfield in, but it's the one you used to see in the magazines and look at and go, wow, that's the one I'd like to have at home. And arguably, yes, it is the best home version. Master System version. Shoot the eyeballs and then shoot the little monster in the stomach. Spectrum version. If you don't shoot the eyeballs and the monster in time, the enemy will just encroach on you. Amstrad CPC. Amstrad actually gave this 57% on original release, although 72% for the Hit Squad version. Back to the 64. Yeah, the tail isn't as big on the 64, and here's the Game Boy version on the Super Game Boy. Yes, I know there's compromises running it on the Super Game Boy, but there's many more compromises trying to record the tiny, awful screen. Game Boy version, I think, is a little bit easier than the other versions. I think it just seems to be, the difficulty seems to be tweaked downwards. Level 1 done. And while we're loading it, it's off to level 2. Here on episode 500. Still can't believe I'm saying that of ChinnyVision. And thank you to all the people who supported the channel over the years, either on Patreon or sending stuff or helping with footage or helping me with stuff. Everything. Thank you to everyone. It's been absolutely amazing. Can't believe it's been nearly 9 years and 500 episodes. I think I was amazed when I was doing Nemesis on episode 50, to be honest. So level 2 has these monster things coming out of the undergrowth and the bits above you. Back onto the ST where the level 1 monster has been destroyed. So the ST version has music with no sound effects due to the 3 channels of the AY. Just watching for the things that come out of the scenery. You take quite a few hits to kill. So if you own an Amstrad GT65 green screen monitor, this is what it looked like for you. And you probably have better geometry than I do. Seriously, my monitor's giving up. I need someone to service it badly. Just chugs too much on the Amstrad. Back to the Master System. I can't say I'm a fan of level 2 of R-Type. It doesn't really have the thrills that you expect. R-Type seems to go in kind of waves. You seem to get big thrills, big end-of-level baddies and so on, and then fairly dull levels like this. Oh, big snake means lots of sprites on the screen at once, and the Master System really... Look at that rippling. Poor Master System can't cope with that. The Force is indestructible, so it can pass through scenery, enemies and everything. Back to the Spectrum. Bob Pape started the coding at his home in Swansea, but moved down to Fareham to work with other developers, and they were fairly close to Activision, who were based in Southampton. But the full, I mean, there's over 100 pages in his book. And here we are on the Amiga using CRT again, so you can see what it would have looked like. But yeah, there's so much detail in this book. I'm not going to start repeating all of it, but it's a great read at 130 pages or so on pretty much just R-Type. So I think the idea with this one is you have to shoot the tube that the enemy snake comes from, but that's often easier said than done. We can also shoot the thing on the top, Game Boy version. So a reduced number of sprites on the screen to account for the smaller screen size. Keep out the way. Not much room to manoeuvre. Oh, yeah, died there. Trying to. I think it is the one they emerge from. You're supposed to shoot all the big eye thing in the top. Master System, and I've done it. Off to level 3, which is, well, I said level 2 is dull. Level 3 is excitement. You get the big spaceship with lots of stuff going on. Lots to shoot. And there are lots of things to avoid. C64 version. Some of the cracks online, such as the one I had, have level 2 and 3 reversed. Don't know why. I've corrected that for this review, but yeah, I actually played level 3 first. And then went back to level 2 for some reason. Don't know why. I do have invulnerability. I'm going to be saying this a lot. Basically, from now on, invulnerability is enabled on all the levels. Because seriously, you're not expecting me to get through 8 levels of R-Type on multiple systems. Are you? I know people do this stuff, but it's not going to be me. Nice pacing on the 64, music works really well. Can't help thinking Zap were a little bit harsh on this. So we should have the engine somewhere to shoot. So level 3 on the Amiga, using the Philips, or Acorn is actually branded, monitor. And I'm using the camera microphone to capture the audio, which is mono, because this monitor only has a mono speaker. Because it was an Acorn one. For some reason, Acorn didn't put stereo speakers in their versions. The monitor didn't get Philips to put stereo speakers in their monitor. There's the Archimedes with all its glorious sound capabilities, and Acorn went, nope, on this £700 machine with a 200 something pound monitor, we're going to give you one mono speaker in the monitor. Amstrad version on colour, CRT again on the same monitor you've seen on the Master System and the Amiga. It's just too chuggy. It really is. I mean, Keith Goodyear's done a relatively good job of adding a splash of colour and stuff, and it's certainly better than some of his other games. I'm thinking of stuff like Speed Zone, which he probably did in less time than he took to port this. But Amstrad Action are right. This isn't a lot of people say, oh, it's one of the best shoot-em-ups on the Amstrad. It's not. It really isn't. However, on the Spectrum, it is quite superb. Look at this. Shame there's no 128K music, but Activision, you know, tight as anything. But Bob's done a great job of just avoiding colour clash. Okay, yeah, big black bands around things, but he's done a really good job. ST version, you've got to be careful at this point because you get crushed down and you have to get up in time over this bit of scenery here. And that thing firing at the top of the screen is what we eventually need to get to in order to win the level. So you end up flying around the front and then going in and zapping the alien things. Which is exactly what we're doing on the 64. Just give that a blast, and there we go, level 3 done. Right, so you've got to keep your eye out on level 4 because there's these things that go along that are copied in Excel that lay these kind of bits of scenery behind them. It's the only way I can describe it, these small dots. And this is one of the levels things will start coming from behind you. I've now got an orb circling me, which is an invulnerability thing, so if anything hits that, it kills them. Right, this is a good weapon now to have on this level because it's got a wide beam. But you can get trapped, so you have to use the orb thing to try and clear the scenery. Back to the Amiga on CRT. So again, I've got one orb above me, and that orb thing is really useful for later levels when you've got things dropping down on you. Shoot through there. Just keep shooting, keep moving there. See, that's what I said about things coming from behind you. Yes, I'm touching everything now. And cutting from the Amiga to the ST, you realise how jerky the ST version is. Although at least the screen size isn't shrunk down. But I'm not liking the fact the sprites are all bigger. I know it's because they've been copied from the arcade, and Mensky was saying actually the pixel size is right, it's just the way the Amiga and ST displays work, but it means everything seems to be bigger. And a level baddie, and this should be the big spiky thing. No, it's not, it's the 3 spacecraft that kind of turn into one. And this is where you use the force to really hit the enemy. Master System version. Those, it doesn't really look like one spacecraft, it's merged together, does it? It's like 3 separate ones, kind of. And the Spectrum. Just keep firing, and you'll be okay. Off to level 5, and yes, I know this is going on forever, but it's R-Type and it's episode 500, so let's stick with it. So off to level 5 on the Amstrad, and we got some of these snake things that kind of like we saw earlier on, except slightly easier to destroy, but they do different things on different versions. Some of them spin off as they're shot. And over back to the Spectrum. Now, I'm quite happy with the power-up I've got at the moment, so I don't want that power-up up there, because I'm not sure what it will be, and it might take away my nice big wide blasting thing and give me something really annoying. So I'm going to stay away from that. I'm sure there's probably a code system. Actually, there's another one there. The game, I know, does try and give you the right weapons for the right moments, but yeah, I don't always want what it's going to give me. Yep, that's flickery. Getting slightly lost against this background, if I'm honest. It's one of those things, there's too much of the same colour on the screen, everything's getting a little bit lost. But now I've got 2 orbs surrounding me, so I'm protected from above and below. C64 has no such trouble shifting the sprites around, so no flickering here. Oh, now this is a big boulder thing. In Bob Pape's book, he says actually in R-Type there's really only, I think he says 4 real end-of-level baddies, and the rest you can treat as scenery as a coder. It doesn't make any difference as a player, but as a coder, the rest are scenery apparently. So this is more like what the end of the level should look like. That C64 version's weird. It's a spaceship surrounded by boulders. And that's the baddie done with on the C64, and there's no spaceship underneath, it's just boulders. Another music change on the 64. C64 fudges this level a little bit because these baddies are much smaller than the other versions. Here we are on the Amiga, and that's what the baddies are supposed to be, these massive machine things. As I start overlapping scenery with my invulnerability. I've got quite a lot of speed ups on the Amiga, and it makes the game very twitchy on the Amiga and ST. Oh dear, it's very flickery on the Master System. Again, just flying around a lot. Well, getting a lot on screen now. Yeah, there we go. There's just this breaking point. Oh, look at that ripple. There's just this point where the old Master System can't cope and everything goes a bit nuts. Yeah, I mean, I'm outright cheating. But hey, we want to get to the end of the game, right? And the end of this review. Everyone's probably tuned out already. This has been going on for quite a while. End of level. So this is just those baddies going over and over and over again, really, and just trying to keep out the way because they take multiple hits to kill. I mean, I find this level utterly impossible. You're just trying to find your way around it and avoid the baddies because they're so big and take so many hits. So penultimate level coming up. Over to the 64. Slightly messy background. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, aren't you, on these things, because the background gives it more depth, but sometimes it doesn't work too well, though the parallax is quite nice. Spectrum 48K on composite. What I found on the Specky was when I got to level 7 and got onto level 8, it looped me back to level 7 forevermore. I kept on doing level 7. I don't know why. But it's still managing to have an authentic feel to the game, the enemy patterns, the look and feel of it. It is just a shame there's no 128K version. Reach the end of level on the Specky. And this is where these protective orbs come in use, because things are about to start dropping down from you from above. So you need to try and just stay in one place and let the stuff drop onto them rather than you. Master System version. Well, now I've got a power up I don't like, which is this thing that kind of you fire off and it hits the edges of the screen. I like the big wide one, or the laser one on levels where you need to fire lots of stuff around. Level 8. The final level. These baby things crawl towards you. This level is obscenely hard. There's these galaxy kind of baddies that come after you. Here's one. Looks like a galaxy and it just homes in on you and just kills you. It's absolutely insane. And this level's quite boring until you get to the end where the big baddie is. This is where we are on the Amstrad. Here it is, the big baby thing in its nest. Has anyone ever completed this without cheating? They must have done. I'm sure someone has. But it's quite some achievement to get this far, even more so than Gradius. Here we are on the ST end of game baddie. Slightly different because you lose that thing in front of him. It's done slightly differently, but I mean, you're just going to die. Whereas on the Amiga, you get the pulsing thing in front of him. But then he's dead. We get the end of game message, which is all different R-Type craft flying around in different colours. And a message. Same thing on the Master System. And you get the message and the R-Type craft at the same time. Cheating horrifically now to just defeat that end of game baddie on 64, just so it's done. The C64 version, by the way, is the shortest of all the versions that I played through. I think it's about 20-something minutes. Most of the other versions take about 30. The Amstrad version, the Spectrum version, despite being the same game, the Amstrad version does take longer because the game runs more slowly. I said the game took 6 weeks. The end of game message on the 64 says it took 7 weeks. R-Type, it's an iconic game that's quite well ported to all of these systems, but frankly, you'd rather be playing something like X-Out because that game takes R-Type and just moves it on to such a degree that you come back to R-Type and go, yeah, this was amazing when I first saw it, but today I've got so much more choice. The 8-bits, well, the Spectrum is a coding marvel. Bob Pape did a superb job. Would have been nice to have 128k enhancements, but Activision, being Activision, certainly weren't going to pay for that. The Amstrad version would be so much better if it just, well, had been optimised. The modern port is the version to go for on the CPC. Can't really argue with Amstrad Action giving the original 57%. C64 version, even with the bug fixes on the modern cracks, it's still just a little bit glitchy and just slightly short, if you see what I mean. It's just not quite all that you'd expect from a C64 shoot 'em up. I'd suggest, again, Zap got it bang on with a score in the 70s. MSX version, well, I only saw level 1, but the thing is, on the MSX you have Nemesis, the entire series, Salamander, and all the other stuff. And I'd rather play any of those Konami games, frankly, because they're at home on the MSX. This feels like something else. It's not a game that I'd seek out on that system. Game Boy versions, well, the original is a direct port of the arcade game, but slightly easier with a shrunk down screen. In fact, it makes it much more playable as it is on the Game Boy than the standard versions. Although the hardcore players may feel the shrunk down display doesn't make it authentic enough. R-Type DX on the Game Boy Colour, it looks lovely on that screen, well, as lovely as anything could ever look on a Game Boy Colour screen. Again, it shares much with the original Game Boy version, except much better graphics, and it does have that save state with the battery in the cartridge. A lot of people have told me both these versions they used to play a lot while on the move. Master System version is a joy, even though the sprites are a complete disaster when you start to get a lot on the screen, and it certainly gives NES owners something to envy. ST and Amiga, something wrong here. Even though the Amiga is really smooth and sounds fantastic and plays well, it's just that slightly wrong view of the game, that everything's slightly bigger. There's less movement to move around in the same way that there is on the Game Boy version. On the other 8-bit versions, it just They just feel right, they feel balanced, even if the screen size don't match the arcade. But on the ST and Amiga, it just feels wrong. PC Engine version incidentally scrolls up and down to maximise the screen real estate. Perhaps they could have done that here, perhaps they didn't have enough time, but for whatever reason it just feels slightly off. But if I was going to pick one of them, it would be the Amiga. All of the UK home computer versions are a compromise, as these games always are, and Bob Pape's book gives you excellent insight into just how these things came about, just how tight with money the development companies and the publishers were. I strongly recommend you check that out. It's called It's Behind You, Bob Pape, 138 or so pages, pretty much just about R-Type. Search for it on Google. I'll try and link it in the description below. Check it out, it's really good. That's the end of episode 500 of ChinnyVision. Thanks for watching, thanks for supporting and lasting this long through this very long video. But thank you to everyone.